Okay, so we've kind of talked strategy, big picture, and now we want to talk about the approach that we've seen be really effective in terms of creating communications that are thoughtful and respectful to an audience and where they're coming from, and then writing things or penning things that are relevant to their situation. An easy way to cut this just at a high level is say, well, what market are we even talking about? If we're more or less carbon copying I'll use a welcome letter. So we're sending a new ID card and a welcome letter out to a member, which many of yours experienced over the course of the past 8 weeks here, with the tail end of the open enrollment period and new materials going out. If that message sounds the same for commercial members as it does for your duals, as it does for your MA population, there's a ton of opportunity to sharpen what that communication sounds like and get more resonance. So some of just the basic principles here, but if we're sort of focusing more on value and authority and clarity with the Medicare audience, if we're focusing on convenience and simplicity for those folks with families, these are different words on the page. And it's important to do that just with the context of, I'm not going to go through all of the little attributes on these, but there are, of course, and if we're putting our marketing hat on, real differences between how we respond if we're in one demographic population versus if we're in another. And we know this as general consumers. I'm just now thinking about like watching ads for the Super Bowl recently, and you can feel who's being marketed to if you're watching right after the halftime show versus if you're watching late night TV somewhere. Like these things are very curated as we know for consumers. But when we start to draft health plan correspondence, it seems to be something that we give ourselves the liberty of forgetting. And we're sort of here to tap the industry on the shoulder and say, it's really important that we talk to seniors with respect to what motivates them, with respect to the very changing nature of the tech savvy within the senior population, and so on. And conversely or similarly with the commercial audience, respecting that a huge amount of those people, even if we were to look at different age cohorts by decade, but very likely we have family dynamics here. And so we're not only talking about the member's care, we're talking about the member as a caregiver. And how does that shape the way that we're actually writing a message to someone, how we're acknowledging what the challenges are in his or her life, knowing that they have these dynamics about they're sort of a CFO for the family. They're also a chief medical officer for the family. They're trying to run all of these things, and are we meeting them where they are on that in a different way than an MA population? And finally, with Medicaid and duals, again, a lot of, I think a lot of challenges to assumptions that we have about communicating with this population, but gets really, really market specific in terms of, I know in particular, I've done a lot of work in Southern California where you're going to have endless amounts of dialects and you're going to have so many different languages. And so we need to communicate maybe more through iconography here than we would in a place that has sort of a more singular population from that standpoint. But the same point remains, know who you're speaking to, and you're going to speak much more elegantly to them. So what does that look like then? I mean, we've talked a lot about meet people where they are and use tactics that are relevant to where those people sit. Clarity is a big believer that correspondence is right to be introduced to behavioral science in a really mindful way. I think if any of us are sort of sitting down to write prose to one of our members, we might sort of peripherally think about this and try to write in a compassionate way. But introducing specific tactics is a great way to start the meetings about what does our member correspondence look like. So who are we talking to? And I'll use that MA population again. If we're talking to a Medicare population, I've got an opportunity to maybe use authority, which is right here at the center. The American Medical Association says that your annual visit is one of the most important, whatever that might be. that's going to have a really strong impression on that age cohort. If I were alternatively going to write to that same population with peer pressure here at our bottom left, that's been shown to be a total off-putting no-no for that same population. But it's really effective if we're talking to people in their late 20s, early 30s. And so pulling these things off the shelf for the right audience, not just in a it feels like the right letter way, but to actually specifically institute some of these behavioral principles into communications is a great way to know that you are at least deliberately attempting to meet the membership where they are. And we'll talk about how you can then know if it was effective or not.